Hey, welcome to the You Ask the Pros Answer podcast, your questions answered by the pros you trust. My name is Cole. I'm one of the hosts on the show, and today you are going to see a conversation that I had with Aaron Rogers, where I asked him, Aaron, how can I find a reliable contractor in my area? You know, we live in this day and age where so much of the content that we see online is AI generated. People are paying for advertisements. People are paying to be seen on search engines, and it can be really difficult to know what you need to look out for when you are hiring anybody, but especially somebody who's going to be doing the work on your house. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Aaron Rogers. This is the You Ask the Pros Answer podcast. Do you have questions about an upcoming exterior contracting project? We've got answers. Welcome to the You Ask the Pros Answer podcast. Aaron, welcome. How are you?
I'm great, Cole. How are you?
I am 5 by 5.
There you go.
I learned a new phrase last week that Aaron taught me, and I'm trying to use it in the correct ways.
Yep.
So today, Aaron, you are the expert in this. The question that I have is, how do I find a reliable contractor? So I asked the question, and I'm going to stop you before you even answer. I want to walk you through just some of the things that I've thought maybe are a good idea of way to kind of whittle out some of the chaff, so to speak. But just in general, how would you say it's best to find a reliable, trustworthy contractor?
Well, in the age of technology, easiest thing to do would be to Google it. Obviously, Google is a resource for just about everything. So the quickest and easiest way to look for anything, obviously, is going to be Google.
I want to share a quick story with you, Aaron, and then I'll obviously everybody that's listening and watching will be able to experience this as well. I was just telling Aaron before we started recording that I was on a road trip this past weekend taking my daughter to camp. About an hour and a half from home, the car died on the side of I-71 South. Cars are going by me at like 80 miles an hour. I am literally praying out loud as I'm under the hood of my car, please don't let this 18-wheeler that's coming by ram into me. Anyway, long story short, we have roadside assistance with our insurance company. They recommended a garage. Turns out it was Pilot, one of the truck stops. That was the company they recommended. I didn't need a Gatorade and like a sub, and I don't have a diesel truck. So I had to go on Google while standing on the side of the road because the insurance company would not send a tow truck until I gave them the name and address of a mechanic. I promise this story is pertinent to what we're talking about. So I went to Google and searched mechanics near me. Came up with one. They had a few Google reviews, like maybe 25 or 30, but they were positive. Well, about midnight that night, I am home. Dawn, my wife, had come to pick me up, brought me home. My car's still sitting on the side of I-71 South with the keys in it because that's the only way the tow truck driver could get it. He calls me, the tow truck driver, from the garage that I had sent my car to. And he says, I can't do a South, like Ohio accent, but he's like, bud, I don't think you want me to leave your car here. And he's like, check your messages. I'm sending you a picture of the place right now. And I want to show you, I don't know how well you can see this.
Oh.
Essentially, it's an abandoned gas station turned garage.
I like it.
And needless to say, I am incredibly grateful to this stranger that is the tow truck driver because I did not leave the car there. He took it back to their tow yard, and then he found a shop close by the next morning. All that to say, I went to Google, and in that instance, it wasn't super helpful, and I don't know what happened. So I hear what you're saying. You're saying that Google can be a good resource. What are some of the other ways that you can kind of investigate?
Oh, man. So obviously, anywhere you go, you've got to check your resources. So, if you go to Google, if you go to social media, you can, ask friends and family. You can ask a local Facebook group if they have any recommendations. But you still have to dial that in. You still have to, do your research, and ultimately, if you call it a handful of companies, you still have to figure out whether those people are reputable. Um, and in order to do that, you're going to you're going to deep dive into some other places. You can call the Department of Corporations for the state of Delaware. You can call, the IRS. The IRS will tell you whether or not they have back taxes. You can do just a further Google search into that specific company. You can go to the Better Business Bureau. You can go to Yelp. Um, Ultimately, you're just trying to narrow down into kind of a handful of people that you ultimately want to have a larger conversation with. Um, and then even from there, once you actually meet with these people, that's when you're going to kind of narrow it down even further. Reputable companies don't hide anything, so they should have no issue whatsoever showing you their business license, their insurance, which insurance is something we can dive into a little bit more just because there is more to just showing you proof of insurance. Can you give me some references? I always like to tell people you shouldn't just get references from what you consider to be potential people that they've worked for, because if I gave you the names of 6 of my friends and you call them and you ask them, what do you think of Aaron? At least 5 of those people are going to give you positive feedback. So I always like to suggest, take it a step further. Ask them where they buy the lion's share of their supplies. Ask them who they bank with. There's tons of different ways. If they're certified with a manufacturer, you can call the local manufacturing rep and kind of dive in it a little bit deeper that way. Those people have a little bit less vested into giving you any sort of lies or we'll say massaging of the truth.
Gotcha.
If you call a supplier and those people haven't paid their bill and they've got an overdue credit account and they're now cash only, the supplier typically is not going to give you the most positive or glowing review. If you call their bank and their bank says, no, they're a great customer, they're not going to give you as much information, obviously, because there's a few more laws in place for them. But they'll still give you information. Manufacturing reps, also pretty good source of information. And if they don't have anything positive to say about the people, then chances are they can probably give you a recommendation for guys that they would recommend. So in all reality, I think it's kind of a multi-step process in reality to kind of get the information you want.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that. There's some really good stuff in there. And I don't want our listeners to hear me saying that Google's not a good resource, because again, that was my first place. That was my first thought was, oh, I need to go to Google. And look, when you're searching on Google, what are some good suggestions on kind of sifting through the thousands of responses or hits that Google will give you back when you search for, let's say, roofing contractor in my area or reputable contractor in my area? What are some of the tips that you might have for looking through that? Are you looking at number of reviews? Are you looking at the star rating of the reviews? What would you
Yeah.
recommend there?
So I typically look at number of reviews, and then I kind of look at the average. If there's in the instance of roofers, if there's 10 roofers kind of at the top of the list, what's the average of those 10 roofers? And then I'm going to kind of look at the guys that kind of fit that mold, and then I'll look at what the individual ratings are. Do they have a 4.5, a 4.9? There are companies out there that have several hundred reviews and have a 5.0 rating with Google, which is outstanding. Typically, you're going to be pretty safe with going with a company like that. Other things I like to look at is like how many years in business. I also really, really enjoy people that have an actual address listed. There'll be times where, in the service industry specifically, you'll have people that kind of service an area, but that's not really their main area. So, if, for instance, you look for, auto mechanics in Milton, Delaware, you're probably going to come up with a handful of local shops. If you look for plumbers in Milton, Delaware, you're probably going to come up with 20 or 30 shops. And some of those people are, they could be based out of Salisbury. They could be based out of Dover, they could be based out of Wilmington. But since they service this area, technically they're still going to come up. Now, not to say that they're not great quality companies, but I always choose to do business with a place that I can physically drive to, show up, pay them in person if come down to it. I like to do business face to face. I like to work with businesses that actually have a place that I can visit. And then you look at the actual reviews. Click on the link for the reviews. Me personally, I usually always click on the 1-star reviews. If somebody has 1-star
Mm-hmm.
reviews, I read them with a grain of salt. My company has received some 1-star reviews over the years. Some of them, I have no idea who the people are. They're not in our system. They aren't actually customers. Every once in a while, you'll get competitors that'll give people 1-star reviews. Or sometimes you can just tell that the person who left the 1-star review isn't the nicest person. So you can usually read through those, but every once in a while you will get a good company that gets a 1-star review that's
Sure.
100% warranted. They took my check and it was 3 years later when they actually finished the project. Or, this happened and they backed into my car and they, didn't tell me, and then I had to fight them in court in order to get paid for it. Things like that. You can learn a lot from reading really bad reviews. And then you can also look at how the company responds to those reviews. So how they respond ultimately can tell you the type of people they are. If they give a generic response, then they probably don't care so much. But yeah, again, you can go down rabbit holes with every company you want to work with, and you can do that same exact process on Google for Yelp and for Facebook. And if you Google just about any company, you're going to get probably at least 100 different websites that have information about those companies.
Sure.
And I would say 60% of them are going to be accurate, and the other 40% are just pulling random information from.
All right. So we're still on the surface. We have not committed, or we have not even asked for a quote or an estimate from a company. We're still kind of in the gathering the names. I want to stick there for a minute. So Facebook is obviously one of those platforms that can be used for a lot of good, can also be
Yep.
used for a lot of bad, just like
Agreed.
most things. Are you a fan of putting it out there on your own Facebook feed saying, hey, I'm looking for an electrician in Milton. Anybody have any recommendations?
I do that quite often. I do it sometimes just to get a conversation started. I have some really amazing, reputable guys that have been working for us for years. I love them, have no reason to change. But, I always think it's wise to make sure you have, backups for backups.
Sure.
And, ultimately you can also get a sense of what people are looking for. If you get sometimes asking for recommendations is a really, really good way to learn who not to use. People are a lot more likely to leave a negative review
Yep.
than they are to leave a positive review. Years and years and years ago, I can't remember the exact guy who told me, but they were saying that if you do a good job for somebody, they're likely to tell a couple other people if the conversation happens to come up. We do a really good job on someone's roof, and so-and-so's, they're at lunch with so-and-so and they're talking about potentially need to get the roof done. They go, oh, the guy did mine, did pretty good. Flip that. You do a really bad job for somebody and their roof leaks, and, guy gets caught peeing in the bushes, and, the dumpster scrapes the driveway. Those people will tell everybody willing to give them 3 minutes.
Yep.
They will call people to tell everyone about their experience. They'll lean into the people sitting next to them at lunch to tell them the story.
They'll post it on Facebook. They'll tag the company. Yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
Yeah. They'll write a letter to their pen pal. Email a congressman. So it's an odd thing. People go out of their way to leave negative reviews, and positive reviews seem to be a little bit more difficult to get a hand on. So.
All right. So we're still trying to gather a list of companies. Last week we touched on this, and we haven't even clicked yet on any one of the links that have popped up on Google. We haven't even clicked on any of the Facebook pages of companies that friends and family have recommended. What is the target that you're looking for, or that you would recommend the number of companies that you contact to get an estimate?
So I always recommend three.
Okay.
Um, and you kind of have to have your own set of parameters in place before you start calling around. What's your timeline? What are there specific products that you want? Um, if you call a company that doesn't actually install that brand of product or that style of product, then you're wasting their time and your own. So, kind of knowing what you need and what you want, knowing what your timeline is, these are really, really good things to give the person on the other end of the phone to figure out whether or not they can even meet your needs.
Mm-hmm.
Um, time is the most valuable resource you have. You can't buy it. You can't get any more of it. You can't make any more. So, you know, don't waste your own time. Don't waste their time. But yeah, find a couple of companies that kind of fit those parameters, that fit your timeline, that can offer you the services and the brands that ultimately you want to utilize, and then schedule a time where you can sit down and meet with them. Depending how large of a purchase is, you may meet with the first person and they can meet your needs at a number you feel confident with, and you may sign with them right there on the spot. Larger purchases, most people tend to get multiple prices so they can compare apples to apples. And you will 100% get a kind of a very large range of pricing. The more quotes you get, the larger that range will get. So getting too many estimates is not good either. Again, if you get 5, 6 estimates, I think the most we've ever seen was 9 estimates. Excuse me.
9 estimates?
9 estimates. Guy had a spreadsheet, and he got 9 total. We didn't find that out until after we submitted our bid. He's like, "All right, I'll be in touch." We called him a few days later, and he said he's just waiting on his last one. He said that'll give all 9 of you guys. All 9 of you guys will have the opportunity to give your price. And I was like, "Wow, you got 9 prices?" And he says, "Well, I only got 8, but I got one more coming." So
I've done
when you
less
get
research for college papers.
Yeah, I mean, when you
It's
get that many quotes, even if you were to get 5 quotes, the chances of being able to do a true comparison of apples to apples is it's not great. 3 quotes is pretty easy. Typically, you're going to get you know most of the time you can get quotes that are relatively close. But every once in a while, you'll get 2 that are kind of in the same range, and you'll get one that's kind of way way off, either way high or way low, or so getting 3 quotes kind of gives you a guideline as far as like what ultimately the price should cost.
all right. So we're suggesting that maybe you get about 3 estimates, but we still haven't found a company yet. Let's say we Google reliable contractor in my area. That's kind of general. We're maybe it's reliable roofer, reliable decking company, siding, windows, doors. Usually on Google, you will see a number of links pop up, and below the names, it'll say sponsored,
Yep,
which most likely, not most likely, which that just means that the company is paying to have their link populate towards the top of the page, right?
correct.
Doesn't necessarily say that it's a great company, doesn't necessarily say that it's a crummy company. It's just what it is, that the company's choosing to put some of its marketing dollars toward Google.
That's accurate.
Um, let's say you click on the first link, it takes you to their website. What are some of the things that you are looking for on that company's website to tell you whether A, they're a legit company, B, you would trust them to do the work that they say they're going to do, and just kind of talk a little bit, if you could, about how much stock you put in the website?
Okay. So typically, I'm going to want to see a current website, and what I mean by that is I don't want to see a website that was built 5 years ago and hasn't been touched since. I'd like to see some active feed on there, whether it be blog posts, whether it be current photos. I like to see people. Me personally, and most consumers, people like to buy from people. So I want to
Mhm.
see who the company is. If they've got an about us page, I usually go and I read their backstory. I want to know how they started in the business, what's their reason for being in the business, those type of things. Again, some of this can be fluff. But for me, that's kind of one of the key things that I usually go and look at. Again, I want to see an actual address. I'm a firm believer that even if you don't have a brick and mortar location, there should still be an address, a physical location that you can send stuff. Um, so I always look for that. And then you can dive into, what are their total offerings. If they do roofing, typically you're not going to want to see them doing, bathrooms. If they're a plumber, typically you don't want to see them also doing drywall. Um, so, are they a specialist in what they do, or are they kind of a jack of all trades? Which, nothing against jacks or trades, but you want to kind of dive into, what are they doing on a day to day basis?
Hmm.
If they claim to be a plumber, like, they should just be doing plumbing. And then you can look at certifications and brands and things of that nature. Most people aren't going to post their business license and their insurance, but they typically are going to post like their actual license number. So for the state of Delaware, for the state of Maryland, both of those, you're required to have your license number posted publicly. So if you think it's a good company, if you feel comfortable with the website, if it gives you warm fuzzy feelings, then add them to the list, and you can start to do a little bit more research. Or you bite the bullet and you just go ahead and schedule an appointment. You meet with them and you base it off the feeling you get when they're actually in the home. You can do all the research in the world. At the end of the day, the guy that comes out and actually meets you, you may just not like the guy. I mean, it happens.
Yeah, it might be
So
a great company, and yet the representative that you meet face to face with, they are the company for all intents and
yeah,
purposes, right?
agreed.
Yeah, so trust your gut, especially knowing that most likely that man or woman is going to end up being the one that's your point of contact, or in your
Yep.
home and in your, in your sanctuary, as you called the home
Yeah.
last week. So you mentioned you want to see an up to date website. That was one of the things. I would even say, especially in 2024, as we're recording this, finding their social links is
Yeah.
one thing that, seeing how up to date their social media is. And I'm not going to say that you have to have an awesome social media presence, but it's the low hanging fruit these days. It doesn't cost you a dime to start a
Agreed.
Facebook or an Instagram account, and it can help you get to know the people behind the company sometimes as well.
Agreed.
You mentioned the licenses and insurance. A few minutes back, you mentioned maybe we would talk a little bit more about that. What are some of the things? There's like a baseline that you have to hit to even do business in the state that you're in. But
Correct.
then what are you looking for over and above that?
So obviously, each state has their own requirements as far as licensing goes. The state of Maryland, you're required to get to actually take a test to become a Maryland home improvement contractor or a Maryland builder.
And that's
Uh,
MHIC, right? You'll see that all over
yep.
the place. Okay.
Yeah. And even with doing sales in the state of Maryland, they have a salesperson's license that's kind of under the MHIC license.
Okay.
Those are required to be displayed publicly. Um, Same way with the state of Delaware. The state of Delaware is so ridiculously relaxed. This is a huge negative for the state of Delaware. Every contractor who is a legitimate contractor will tell you the same exact thing. They need to change their licensing laws. I always make the joke in the home with people that Delaware's business license laws are so ridiculous that we could sit at your dining room table and I could pay the $75 business license fee, and I could have you with a temporary license printed out in your name. You are now a business owner in the state of Delaware in less than 15 minutes. Um, Unfortunately, that's one of the reasons why we're having this conversation, is
Yep.
because anybody can be a contractor. Anybody, whether they've been in the industry for 20 plus years, whether they literally got out of prison last week and decided that they're really good with their hands, so they're going to be a contractor. If you go on Facebook, you go on Google, you can look at the amount of people that get ripped off on a weekly basis. There's almost never a week that goes by on one of our most popular Facebook sites here locally is the Who Would You Refer Sussex County site. And there's almost never a week that goes by that there's not somebody on there posting about a contractor who took their money, and they're essentially looking for what recourse do they have.
Mm.
So, it's a very common thing. But so in the state of Delaware, you have a $75 license. 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I can't remember off the top of my head, they came out with a secondary contractor registration. This is a little bit more in depth, and it specifically targets contractors that are working like without insurance and are kind of misclassifying employees as subcontractors and maybe paying people under the table. So it specifically targets that. The downfall to that is they're two separate licenses. You can operate under the $75 standard business license and do business all day, every day in the state of Delaware, and there's not really anything that's going to happen to
Hmm.
you. So, it's $75 for the regular license. It's $200 for the contractor registration. But again, you can legally operate under that $75 license all day, every day. So there are ways that you can kind of look into that and figure out if your contractor is legitimate. He should obviously have both of those. If he's not so legitimate, he'll probably only be able to provide the one license. And again, different states around us. Virginia has like 3 or 4 different levels of license. It's all based upon, the size of the contracts and, your total gross revenue within the state. And then, all the way up to your top license, which you can pretty much do anything, anything you need to. So, licensing is one of those things I hope the state of Delaware eventually kind of gets a little bit more stringent in. I firmly believe that every contractor should have to go through the test. It's not that difficult of a test, but it does require people to study,
Yeah.
study and actually, pay the money to go get the test and consider themselves legit. So,
Yeah. It shows that they have more skin in the game.
exactly.
Yeah.
You invested the time and the money, the energy to go actually there and be a legitimate contractor and learn the basics. It's not just about what you know about the products and the stuff that you install, but it's going to teach you specifically about the laws for your individual state. It's not just to protect the consumer, but it's also to protect yourself.
Yeah. Yep.
People can scam you just as well as you can scam them. So, and then the other thing was insurance. So insurance is one of those things that's really easy to fake. Most people don't realize this because they just say, "Hey, can you give me proof of insurance?" It comes on this really nice, neat piece of paper called like an accord statement. Uh, they're fairly generic outside of the actual writing. So those things are only really good if you call and make sure they're actually real. So on that, you should have a couple of different things on there. You're going to want to see not only their general liability, which is kind of your standard business insurance. Every business pretty much has general liability. But then you're also going to want to see, I would like to see their auto insurance on there as well.
Mm.
Any legitimate business should have a business vehicle. That business vehicle should be insured underneath the business name as well. And then the last one, which is super, super important, is your workers' comp. Workers' comp should be on there. Some places it's going to be a separate piece of paper, but workers' comp is super important for the consumer to be aware of because if an employee gets hurt on your job site or in your yard in your home,
Yeah.
and the business owner does not have workman's comp, you've got some skin in the game. They can go after the business owner and they can go after you as the actual property owner. But again, it's really, really easy to figure that out. If the guy you're hiring has a bunch of people coming to your house wearing his company shirt and working underneath his name, he 100% should be able to provide workman's comp, a proof of workman's comp insurance. So, asking somebody to see their insurance, I want to see all three. If you drive to my property, I want to see your auto insurance. If you're going to be working underneath a company name, I want to see your general liability license. And if it's more than just you coming into my house, I want to see workman's comp insurance. So those 3 things right there, if you can't provide proof of them, unfortunately, you're not reputable. You've got to cover those 3 things. It's not just for the business, but you as the consumer, these are the things that you need to make sure that business is covering you as well as themselves. So, and again, anybody can show you a piece of paper. I know what they look like. You can Google what an accord statement is, and it'll pop up and show you exactly what the insurance paperwork looks like. If you can get a piece of paper of it, you can fake one. It's not that hard. My My 12-year-old could most likely use standard Microsoft Paint and create an insurance document for you. So when you get that document, great. Now you've got the proof. Now just make sure the proof is actual proof.
Yeah. Yep.
The people they purchase it off, they should have a name, number, and address at the top. Give them a call. Make sure the policy is active. There used to be a running game back in the day where you could buy a 12-month policy, you pay your first premium, and you've got a piece of paper that says your policy is good for 12 months, and you've paid $96 for that, and then you never pay another payment. But on paper,
yep, you still got
on paper, you're covered.
Yeah.
That game still happens. Every once in a while, we will have people that stop in and they want to become a subcontractor for us, and we'll call and we'll check on their stuff, and the policy hasn't been active in many, many, many months. So again, get it in writing, get the paper, and then double check that it's accurate.
All right, that is all we have for you today on the You Ask the Pros Answer podcast. This was just part one of my conversation with Aaron. Be sure to tune in next Friday for the conclusion. But hey, before we go, can you please help us continue to get the word out about the show? The best way to do this is to leave reviews on Apple Podcasts, follow us on social media, or simply tell a friend. Also, if you are watching on YouTube, would you please be sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel? Also, before we go, we want to hear from you. What are some of the questions you have related to exterior home remodeling? The process involved, the options that are out there. Would you please send your questions to info@askproexteriors.com and place "You Ask" in the subject. If you are facing an upcoming home project, we hope this episode has empowered you to tackle it with confidence. Remember, knowledge is power, and a little research can go a long way. Until next time, happy homeowning. The You Ask the Pros Answer podcast is produced in-house by the Pro Exteriors team. Pro Exteriors is the exterior contracting division of Empire Construction Group, LLC. This podcast is intended for informational purposes only and should not be considered legal advice. For more answers to your questions, please subscribe to this channel and podcast so you'll never miss an episode. Do you have an upcoming home remodeling project? Find more answers to your questions at askproexteriors.com.